Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Sam. It's been probably about a month since my last video. I had planned to upload a bit sooner, but obviously we're in wedding season now, so I just don't have that much time. However, I've actually got about a week off at the moment where I'm completely up to date with editing, so I thought I'd get a couple of videos recorded and then release them over the next few weeks. So hopefully there'll be a few more videos coming out from me on this channel. Today, once again, I'm in the living room because I don't really have a good enough setup in the office to do this kind of video, but I wanted to do a video on the way I rig out the S5II and S5IIX. The main focus for my rigs is partly for weddings, but also for commercial shoots and general bigger productions. And it's built around the Blackmagic VideoAssist, so I can shoot B-Raw. Now I don't always shoot B-Raw, and in fact, most of the time I don't, but I do like to have the flexibility for some of the productions that I do. And then if not, I also like the ability to shoot ProRes, and having used both the Atomos Ninja and the Blackmagic VideoAssist, I generally prefer it. I'll probably do a review at some point. There's only one that I don't like about the video system, that's the way the USB and hard drive system works. But everything else, it's quicker to turn on, it's a brighter screen, and B-Raw is just an infinitely better format than ProRes RAW as far as I'm concerned. Also, apologies, it's a sort of sunny, cloudy day. This is the best I can do with the setup at the moment. Enough waffle. The first setup is going to involve, obviously, my S5IIX. That's my go-to camera for weddings, commercials. I usually use it with my 24-70, although I do tend to enjoy using my 85mm lens and also sometimes the 35 and 50, but generally speaking, the 24-70 is my go-to. Now, a lot of the time I'll just tend to use this as is, or maybe with a side handle, which I'll show in a second, and a top handle, which actually is more for just carrying rather than actually getting low angle shots. But sometimes there is a need to rig it out a bit, not necessarily for my eyesight or just preferring to have a screen, but actually for my neck. The problem is when you're trying to get sort of sensible angles, not at head height when you're 6'5", you have to have it sort of down to here, chest or even lower, and then you're looking down the whole time, and it's caused me neck problems. The first parts of my rig involve three main components. We have this Nitsy side handle with an Arri rosette attachment. We have my main tilter cage. I can't even remember the name of it now. It's just the tilter S5IIX full cage, and it does come with an additional bit with the rails, which I'll show you later. What I liked about it is it's got rails at the top for quick release on the top handle, and then rails at the bottom for attaching onto the bottom attachment, which includes a 15mm rod like adapter basically, which I'll show you in a bit. And then the other bit is the handle that came with it. Generally I like this handle. I think I've mentioned before, the only thing I don't like is the kind of weird angled design, which means if I want to mount a monitor on the front, it never really stands upright. So I have to have it on the top, which is a little top heavy, but actually given my height, it kind of works. This is my basic setup for weddings. This is about as much as I rig it out when I'm really on the go and I don't want to attach a monitor, especially if I want to keep it low profile and we're moving around a lot, or if it's just a bit conspicuous to have the monitor. This is about as much as I'll rig it out to. This side handle is really good for if I'm trying to capture static shots while handheld or doing walking shots like the confetti shot. I don't really use the top handle for low angles all that much because I never really have a reason to go much lower than hip height anyway. What I actually use it for is just carrying it, because I can basically wrap my finger around it like this, and then if I'm just walking along, it's very unlikely to fall out of my hand. Now I do need to get a little camera strap as well, like a little handheld one, but this is generally pretty secure. It's not going anywhere. And yeah, this works for me. The only real downside, and this is again part of the reason for the need for a monitor, flipping the screen out like so, you can't flip it all the way like that, so it ends up being slightly at an angle, which it's okay, it's fine, I can work with it, but this again is the reason for the monitor. This is the monitor I'm using when I'm doing run and gun. This is the Blackmagic VideoAssist 12G 5-inch version, which I recently acquired. So I'm using the small rig monitor adapter, which just sits here in the cold shoe mount. I do also have this one, which is the friction one, but again, with the weight of the 7-inch, it just doesn't quite work. So I stopped using that one. I mean, it does work for this, but shake it a little bit. You know, if you move too much, it will flip-flop, so it's not my favorite mount. This one with the tightening screw is a lot better. So that will just sit on top there, and as you can probably already tell, it's quite tall. But for me, that kind of works. Again, when you're trying to shoot at chest height and you want to kind of not be looking down the whole time, this actually works really, really well. And then I usually just use it with a single MPF 970. I try not to use two because again, I don't want too much weight when I'm filming a wedding all day. So I just usually use one of these Viltrox ones. They're all right, they do the job. And then that'll last for a couple of hours and that's basically it. Oh, and then, yeah, might need an HDMI cable. Okay, so this is basically how I have it set up. Again, this is just for weddings. I'm always recording internally, so I'm literally just using the Blackmagic VideoAssist as a monitor for this setup. There's not really any need to use any of the inbuilt features because actually the monitoring features on the Lumix are pretty good. And I'm not recording RAW or anything, so I usually just output info and everything onto here as I am literally just using it as a monitor. That's the basic wedding setup, but the next one is the big one. This is what I use to record Blackmagic Raw. I can record Blackmagic Raw here, but again, the problem is because of the way this one works, you've got this stupid little USB-C port right on the bottom here that's in the way of the monitor mount. It's ridiculous. Whereas with the 7-inch version, you don't have that problem. So hence why I don't use this for this setup. This is everything I use to fully rig out this camera. So I'm going to do that now and try my best to kind of explain as I go. I don't really know how I'm going to edit this, but we'll see how it is. Again, I don't really plan these kind of practical videos, but yeah, we'll see how we go. I open the screen up so it doesn't get caught in anything. The next job is to put on this bit so it'll make it adaptable with 15mm rods. To power it, I'm using one of these Moman 99 V-mount batteries and one of the small rig adapter clamps. Now I actually lay it flat and you'll see why very soon. We're going to put on the V-mount battery and already we've got kind of it's looking all right so far. We might have to adjust it slightly, but that's actually coming together quite nicely. Next up, we're going to attach the power supply. Now I won't fully fix the cables in just yet because I need to make sure it's got enough slack to move. We'll attach the monitor, which is a big boy. It's quite huge. And that will sit on top of here. As you can see, it's already getting quite large, but again, for what we're doing, it actually works pretty well. And it's already pretty evenly balanced. This is part of the reason why I have this flat and not, so it's actually, at the moment, it's not tilting too far back or forward. It's ever so slightly back heavy, but we can move that. Okay, so we've tucked the wires in here. Again, I can tidy it up a bit more, but just so you can kind of see, I've tucked the wires back in here. I'm then just going to push the camera back slightly on the rails. And that should hold pretty well. I'm still getting used to the idea of rigging things, but this is it's working for me in what I'm doing. And as you can see now, it's actually pretty well balanced. And it's nice and flat when I put it down on the table, which is great. So then there's just a few things to add at the end. I'm gonna put the SSD mount here. The SSD then goes in the top here. And then once I wide it up, I can still lift it like that without banging anything. There we go. That is basically how we've got that rigged. And then the last thing is obviously to connect up the HDMI cable and then one more item to add at the end. So I'm pretty content with that. That should hold pretty well. Again, I'm not going to show you now, but I've got some additional Velcro ties that I can just put in here to kind of hold it in place. And then the last thing we're going to add is this little mini matte box from Small Rig. Let's be honest with matte boxes, most of the time you add them to look good. There is a purpose for it. If you don't know, it's basically to kind of cut out some glares from lights and stuff. And I am finding that there are occasions where I do actually need this, but most of the time it will just sit on there because it does look a bit more legit. It looks like a cinema rig. It's 50% looks, 50% useful features. This can take, I think, 4x5 filters. I don't really use them at the moment. Again, I'm just using this to cut out some of the flares, especially when I'm outside. But again, it's just gonna stay on the camera. So that is the main rig. This is what I'm using for big productions like commercials, concerts, anything where I've got a bit more time, I'm not filming for the whole day, and I've got a little bit more control. I appreciate with concerts, it's a live event, but you still have a bit more control in terms of where you're gonna be at that moment. You're not filming for the whole day and kind of having to run and gun the whole day. This can still be a run and gun rig, absolutely, but it's just a bit heavier. Just allows me a bit more versatility in terms of recording options, in terms of nailing focus and stuff with this humongous monitor. As I said, I've got this set to record B-Raw at the moment. As I've mentioned before, B-Raw is one of my favorite formats, but I wouldn't use it for everything. I got asked why I don't shoot B-Raw for weddings by a photographer, and it's just down to the fact that the file sizes are big, even at 12:1. And I don't really need to be shooting everything in RAW, especially because as soon as you shoot RAW, you don't get the built-in noise reduction or lens correction necessarily. So you're actually adding extra steps that you just don't need when you're shooting weddings. However, when you're shooting a bigger commercial project and you're not shooting loads of them, you've got more time, that's when RAW really comes into its own. Now, I personally prefer B-Raw over ProRes RAW, mostly because it works really well in Premiere. Now, I know that's sacrilegious. Why are you not using DaVinci Resolve? It's just preference. I appreciate there's plenty of issues with Adobe, it works for me. And it also means that I can hand off projects to DaVinci Resolve editors and they'll love me for the fact I'm using B-Raw because it works so well inside that system. But then again, it also runs really well on my system, which is kind of old now, but because of the way the compression works, it's still buttery smooth, even on my machine, which is like 6 years old. I also just love the fact that you can do compression up to 12:1, which I don't believe you can do with ProRes RAW. I think it goes down to maybe 8, which that's quite a difference. And 12:1, unless you're doing like hugely complex sequences, 12:1 is a beautiful image. And one of my previous projects I actually shot in it and it was amazing. Really, really nice system to use. So yeah, that is my big main rig. It's far from perfect. I'm sure people in the comments are going to tell me how I've done a horrible job setting up the SSD, whatever, but this works for me. I'm not a perfectionist, I just like something that's gonna work practically for me. It's quite nice like this, and I can easily zoom, I can see what I'm doing, I can pull focus with one hand, and it's still pretty sturdy. I think the one thing I do want to add would be a follow focus setup, especially if I'm gonna start using anamorphics in the future. And I do want to get something to protect this a bit better, or maybe some different cables, but for the most part, it works really well. I've never had any power issues or power outages because of doing that. So that's that rig. The next one I'm going to show you is one for a gimbal. This again is specifically for shooting B-Raw or ProRes onto the Blackmagic VideoAssist. It's not the best rig in the world, but it works for what I've got, and I'm trying to use more of what I've got and only buy minimal things I really need rather than buying a whole new setup. This is the final setup. This is one I've only recently started to test. I've not actually used it on the project yet, but I'm sure I will soon. One of the last projects where I used that kind of cinema rig setup, I was doing walking shots and I think a gimbal would have been a better choice. And at that point, I didn't have the right setup for it. I didn't really have an easy way of swapping from handheld to gimbal using that setup. Having the second Blackmagic VideoAssist makes a huge difference. And I'm going to be using my S5II now, so hence we've actually swapped that to the S5IIX, so the angle may have changed slightly as I've had to completely change the setup. I'm sure it'll be fine. And I'm going to show you the setup I've got, which does the job. I didn't have to buy too many parts for it. All I've had to buy is a small rig arm. The rest of the parts I either had or borrowed. First things first, obviously let's get the camera onto the gimbal. Again, this is my super old Ronin RSC. It's still hanging in there, so I'm going to use it until it dies. So next up, we're going to need these items. You'll notice I'm using a different Samsung SSD. That's purely because, again, if I want to shoot multicam, shooting in this format or shooting ProRes, whatever it is, I don't have to use the same SSD. This is one I got a little while ago on one of the Amazon Day Prime things, whatever. This is something I got on the most recent Amazon Prime Day, so I got it for, I don't know, £50. It's small, but it's surprisingly good quality. I've already attached the rosette attachment, so I've taken the original one off and put that one on, which came with this. I've attached the cold shoe partway down the arm, and then it already has a monitor mount built in, so that'll come in very, very handy. So we're going to be mounting this monitor upside down and kind of underslung. Good thing is that the MPF batteries just click into place, so that's not a problem. It's mostly to have the HDMI not be hitting any of these parts, which is kind of important when you're rigging up a gimbal. The gimbal's on at the moment. I haven't finished rigging everything. However, I just wanted to see, as you can see there, nothing's hitting it. Obviously it swings out a lot, but again, if you're gonna have a monitor on, you're gonna have to deal with something like that. But as you can see, it holds itself quite well, and it's not hitting anything. And it's also not getting any of these wires in shot. When I had it rigged before, you get this wire would go in shot before it turned fully. We're next gonna add on the SSD mount, which will go on the back here. I'm using a Samsung T7 over a T5. It's a bit bigger, however, it does fit actually okay. And that is the rig. Fortunately, because it comes with a monitor mount, there's enough space just for the USB input. If I had one of these, it wouldn't work. So then lastly, it'd be a case of just switching it on, outputting to RAW. I'm not going to do that now, but you can get the idea. So there we have a couple of Cinema Blackmagic VideoAssist rigs for the S5II and S5IIX. Again, apologies if this video feels a little disjointed. I don't tend to script these, I just kind of go with how I feel it should go, and I probably have to fix a lot in editing, so future Sam is going to be very thrilled with me. But again, all the rigs I've shown you are ones that I use or have used or I'm going to use because I know they'll fill a need that I have. Again, I bang on about B-roll because I think it's a really good format, but it's not useful for everything. And actually there's plenty of situations where ProRes makes a lot more sense, which again is quite a common standard in a lot of areas. And it means that as I'm starting to work towards hopefully bigger, higher end projects, that the equipment that I have should still be sufficient for a lot of things, whether it be events or commercials or maybe some documentary stuff, which is something I want to move into more. And again, I've been watching a lot of Luke Forsyth's videos and actually figuring out if doing more documentary stuff would be suitable for me. All the motivation for doing these and these videos is really just towards expanding beyond what I'm doing at the moment. I love my job, I want to continue doing my job, but that being said, I want to diversify and move into other areas, but still finding a few niches that work for me. Right, enough waffle, that's going to be the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm sure there are plenty of ways I've done this which are not the best. I don't claim to be the best, I just claim to have a system that works for me. Maybe I've taught people something, maybe there's stuff people can teach me. I'm always open to that. In the meantime, please do consider subscribing. I'm trying to upload once or twice a month when I can, sometimes more, sometimes less. As I've said before, I'm doing this for as long as I feel like I want to do it and as long as I enjoy it. At the moment, I do enjoy it, albeit I don't have a lot of time for it. So taking the opportunity to do this at the moment is great. Anyway, as I said, hope you enjoyed and I shall hopefully see you in the next one. Goodbye.